Hello and welcome to episode 140 of the Brass Junkies. I'm your host, Andrew Hitz, and I am joined by my inquisitive, insightful, and something else co-host, Lance LaDuke. Lance, how are you?
I'm good. I'm wondering what to be insightful about.
I was trying to think of another I word, and I just couldn't think of it. I was like igloo. I couldn't think of anything. So, yeah, I just...
Ignorant?
Yeah.
Ignominious?
Actually, ignorant. See, if I had thought of ignorant, I would have gone there. And I would have...
Imbecilic?
Yeah.
Irritating.
See, I knew if
Irreverent?
I knew if I outsourced this that irritating.
Illuminating.
What about irritating?
Irritating.
So we just had an incredible conversation with John Lofton, the bass trombone player of the LA Phil. He's awesome.
So cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
It was really great. We had some laughs. We talked about some really serious stuff. We talked about the lack of African American representation in orchestras, and yeah, it was a powerful conversation. I really, really, really enjoyed it, and I knew that I would. I know that you have played with him. We talked about that a lot in the bonus episode, and he talked about working with Sam, which was great. But I had met him when I was a graduate student in Arizona when he was in the Phoenix Symphony, but didn't actually really know him. But he's like one of those guys. I feel like I do know him now. Like we just chatted for an hour, and I feel like I know him. So
yeah. He's just such a cool guy, laid back, and plays the daylights out of the bass trombone. Holy moly!
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yeah, he's pretty good. So if you're listening to this the day this is being released, then we are about to have day 2 of the Brass Junkies Academy Summer Workshop.
True.
And fear not, if you have missed the first day, or if you're listening to this in the future, this thing is available online through the entire summer, through September 1st, all 20 hours. We've got 15 guests. The other trombones, for those of you who are tuning in for this one, are Donna Parks and Joe Alessi. We couldn't get anybody good, so we got the two of them to round out John Lofton. Yeah, it's a laugh out loud list of faculty that we're going to be talking to throughout the week, and we're going to have an evening hang each time. But again, the whole thing is going to be available online, so you can go to brassjunkies.academy or brassjunkiesacademy.com, whichever one you would prefer, and the whole thing's $109. So even if it's August right now, you can access all that stuff for that low price. So, and thank you to everybody who has left a rating and a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get the Brass Junkies. It's really, really helpful. Those numbers are actually really starting to climb, which is awesome. I really appreciate it. I know it's a heck of a lot easier. I always listen to podcasts when I'm on the go, back when I used to be on the go, when I wasn't just stuck in my house. And it's...
Oh, I thought you meant in the bathroom.
It's never the right time to go and leave a rating or a review. So thank you to anybody who has done that. And anything else, Lance? I guess thanks to our Patreon patrons who get to hear the bonus episode. Was a really good one. So yeah, there's some good stories in there. Also in the main episode, we get to hear about the LA Phil touring Venezuela, where they played every Mahler symphony on the same tour, which is crazy. Yeah, some really interesting stuff here from John. So hey, Lance, thank you for just being such a wonderful co-host.
You know what I appreciate most about you, Andrew, is your sincerity.
And without further ado, let's get to the conversation that we had with the bass trombonist of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, John Lofton. And today on the Brass Junkies, we are joined by one of the best bass trombone players in the world. No pressure. His name is John Lofton. John, how are you?
I'm doing great. Great to see you, Andrew.
Yeah.
And Lance.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey, over here.
Yeah.
I know.
It was just, he was talking and
No, I get it.
That actually reminds me that my mother, I told her that I had that I had a conversation on the phone with Lance and with Will Houchin, our third partner at Petaluma Media, and then she said, Will, I'm up at my parents' summer house right now, and Will has visited here. And she said, right after I said Lance and Will, she said, "Oh, he's a really nice guy." And I said, "Yeah, I agree. Lance isn't either." She was like, "No, that's not what I meant. Lance is a really nice guy too." It's very funny. My mother was throwing shade at you, Lance, so I thought that you should know.
All right, good to know. It's going in the show notes. Carol.
So John
Dissed
plays
Lance.
plays bass trombone in the L.A. Philharmonic. How long have you been with the Philharmonic?
Well, officially, I started here in 2008, but I started my first stint here as a long-term sub in 2004. I played the 2004-2005 season, went back to my previous job, and then came back for 2006-2007 season. And then in 2008, I was fortunate enough to win the position.
Wow, that's great. How often does someone that subs that much end up getting those jobs? I mean, it's anecdotal. It seems like it can go either way, right? Because they know how good you are, but they also maybe know what what you can't do, and so it's like it. Yeah, it can go either way. Do you know how often that kind of thing works out in the business?
I can't say for all orchestras, because there are certainly different circumstances. I think in this orchestra, it's not common. We have like a lot of long-term subs, and it's been fairly uncommon that they would actually win the job.
Hmm.
In that circumstance, it's really, it's a good question, because I think people really need to understand that if they're in that situation, that you do run both a risk, but you also can garner a benefit. The benefit would be that people hear what you do, they respect your professionalism, and that when it comes down to a decision-making process, that factors into it. But of course, you run the risk that people, as you alluded to, hear the things that you don't do well or the issues that you can't handle, and that also can be a factor.
Yeah.
I want to add just one thing, and I know
Please.
this sounds really, really off from left field, but I do think that it's a difficult, I don't know if maybe that's not the right word, but I do think that there's a challenge, for people that are complete unknowns. You know, in our world, we don't really have a lot of African Americans in these positions, especially solo part positions. And so the idea of having had this opportunity to be a part of the Philharmonic and to kind of basically breach that gap where people look upon you and they don't know who you are, they've never sat next to a person who looks like you, and you can basically satisfy whatever concerns that they have in that regard. I think that was a benefit for me. I mean, I honestly think that if it were just me taking that audition, that it may not have turned out as well as it did.
Interesting. Wow. The I'm trying to remember what it was called, but Weston Sprott, who we've had on, we asked him to if he could come back on to talk to us about everything that's going on. Well, let me be clear, everything that has been going on in the world for a very, very, very long time, but that has made a lot of our radars more over the last few weeks or month. And he very respectfully declined because he's been getting pulled in so many directions. We're going to have him back on, but he recommended some things to read, and I read some of them, and one of them led me to I think it's called the McGurk effect, which was really, really fascinating to me, where there's a video, we will link to this in the show notes, where there was a guy saying ba, ba, ba over and over again. And then the video changed, but the audio didn't. To him, it looked like he was saying fa, 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 and the brain absolutely filled in the F sound. I mean, it was really kind of crazy. And just talked about how like we absolutely listen with our eyes as well. Yeah, it was very, very insightful to me. And so I was going to make a joke that it helps when you play the bass trombone like John Lofton does in terms of like getting signed on long term. But that's really interesting that you feel like it was a real benefit to you because they got to sit next to you over and over and over again and see what you were all about, and that maybe took away some of those other issues, at least in some regards.
I firmly believe that. And, when it really boils down to it, auditions, committees, that's a real bastion of power for orchestral musicians. I mean, we don't get a chance to pick who is our conductor. We don't pick the repertoire. We don't pick the locations, but we do get to pick the people that we sit next to. And one of the things that I think is important for people to feel good about, one of the things I think that people do is they generally look for an alter ego. So in other words, you'll find a player that has the values that you feel are important, and maybe they do them a little bit better than you, but they certainly wouldn't be from left field. And one of those values has to be, whether or not you've had any experience in a situation, especially a working situation, a daily situation. And as you know, if you work in an orchestra, you probably spend more time with your colleagues than you do with your family in many circumstances. And that it's important that people get a chance to experience you as a person, and that in turn is going to be beneficial down the road.
Yeah, when in the chamber music world, I know that we, in Boston Brass, when we were hiring new people, we would always say, we have to be able to coexist with this person in the van as well as on stage and as well as business partners. And there's a lot of layers there. And for orchestras, there's not necessarily a van, but boy, you're going to sit next to that person or those two people. I say singular because tuba's on the left. We tend to just have a little space. So, but that means that whoever is on our right, which would be you, fine sir. Yeah, if that person's a problem, then we are on an island. Yeah, it's like we can talk to ourselves or to our right. So that had better be pleasant. But so you've done a lot of work in terms of diversity within the arts and within classical music. What do you think about this moment that the world seems to be having, which I'm hoping is not a moment? I'm hoping it's a long, like a movement that maintains momentum. I think that remains to be seen. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I am really, of course, shocked at what basically created these issues, the poignancy of it, the callousness of, the act itself that happened in Minneapolis. But I'm also heartened by the response. I think the response has been greater than I even imagined would happen, because I'm just going to say, the notion of violence against African Americans is not new. It's been something that has happened over and over again. But what we are seeing, I think, now is like a perfect storm. We have all these, we have COVID-19. We have people that have been cooped up for several months. And now, this happens. They've had a chance to process it and not be distracted by their other lives activities, and they're responding to it. So I think that this basically creates an opportunity, not only for orchestras, but our culture, but I think even especially orchestras, to take what's happening very seriously and ask themselves, how can we do something to help this situation? How can we become more relevant and more diverse in our own presentation to the community, and thereby be able to leverage that value into even greater levels of support? Because when you think about it, most every big orchestra, and even small orchestras, they're in big major cities, most of whom have majority or very significant African American or Latinx populations. The idea that you have an orchestra that's a repository for the story, relating the story of humanity, it seems to me that it's a good idea that storytelling include as many different kinds of humans as possible.
Yes.
And the idea that we can basically use this as an opportunity, not just for African Americans, but for all people to benefit from this incredible uh, pool of talent and that's already in our society. The idea that we are now creating some momentum for that is something that I think is incredibly important and incredibly important for us to act now to remedy what's happened in the past.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about it is kind of a perfect storm because orchestras have always had I shouldn't say always, in the last 50 years, they've had this sort of tenuous relationship sometimes with the communities which they purport to serve, and the lack of representation or resonance with what the orchestras present in terms of how it resonates with the city that it is a part of. And that's kind of always been the case, as you pointed out. And now, on top of COVID and the incredible disruption in the industry in playing live music for live audiences, it allows the potential, particularly in light of the Black Lives Matter movement, to evaluate: are we as an organization serving our community, and are we serving all of the communities, and how might we be a part of these communities in ways that we haven't in the past? And there's always been this sort of, we just play music by dead white European dudes, most of whom had the last name started with a B. And maybe there are some other musics that we can play. How hopeful are you? Now, you happen to be at the LA Phil. And so with Deborah Borda and with Dudamel, there's been some of the most interesting ideas and programming and programs. I mean both musical programs and then outreach programs, at least from the outside looking in. Your orchestra seems to be one that is trying, at least from the outside looking in, is trying to walk the walk.
Yeah.
And do you feel like, how do we do it? How do we change it? Like, what's next for orchestras is a big question. And I don't imagine that you know the whole answer, but that hits you in the pocketbook a lot more than it hits me, that question. So what do you do with all this? Kind of where are you in processing all of that?
Well, that's a really good question. I think, the thing about the Philharmonic here in LA, we did a tour to Venezuela, and we're probably one of the few big orchestras that did, all kinds of issues, because we know all the security issues that are present in Venezuela and the political issues as well. But, if you can put that aside and just take a viewpoint of the effect of the Venezuelan program El Sistema on the people, and there are, myriads, literally hundreds of young people who have come up through that program and have glommed on to this career in music. And you have to ask yourself, what would those people be doing if they didn't have somebody teaching them the violin or the trumpet? I mean, would they actually be people that, would be thwarted in their own abilities to, to express themselves or have good ideas about, their own self-value, their own self-worth? I would say the answer is yeah. And I think that has been the greatest part of that. So in Los Angeles, we have YOLA, which is Youth Orchestra LA, and that is an organization that serves a community that's very similar in demographic, in terms of their ethnic demographic, but also their economic demographic. So if they don't have money, they can get instruments, they can basically go and take lessons with some of the best teachers around. When we go on tour, they go with us. They see the world. They even played at the halftime of a Super Bowl. And heck, I haven't even been to a Super Bowl. So the bottom line is that, I think what we're trying to do with this is to fuse our culture into, or meld our culture into the greater Los Angeles culture. And by doing so, we're creating, basically people that will not only have a good feeling about the Philharmonic in terms of why it needs to exist, but they hopefully some of those will actually become members of the Philharmonic. And if not members, they'll be supporters of the Philharmonic down the road. I mean, we all know that when it comes down to kids, there's this old saying, a kid will, he'll never forget you if you're nice to them, and he'll never forgive you if you're not. Well, the bottom line is that, yeah, in our community down the road, people will have that sense of what the Philharmonic is really about. And they will, in turn, be much more likely than not to support the Philharmonic and to come to concerts. And we're taking that even a step further with our resident fellows program. This program is one which basically is an intern program for Latinx and African American and I think Native Americans and also Pacific Islander Americans who basically can come into the Philharmonic for up to 3 years and they get what I would consider a pretty nice level of support where they can hone their craft and go out and win jobs. And we've had actually two people that have won jobs in other orchestras. I don't know if it's okay to mention them, but one in St. Louis Symphony and one was a title position in Seattle Symphony.
Wow.
We have right now we have three others and that are currently our fellows, and we have two more that are coming in. So I think when you look at a concert performance, there was a PBS performance that happened, I think maybe last month or so, and you look at the orchestra and you see these members in the orchestra, it really has a tremendous impact on the community. And I myself have gotten feedback from patrons, from friends, and other colleagues in other orchestras, like, hey, wow, there's like X number of people in that orchestra that are African American or Latinx, and it's really incredibly impactful. So I think that the Philharmonic's embracing of this is it's a risk. There's money that's being spent on it. There are resources that are being allocated, but I think the reward speaks for itself. And I think that there'll be both short-term and long-term benefits realized from this.
I think so. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many people who are evaluating, is this thing for me? Is this orchestra in my city? Do I feel comfortable there? Does it represent me? And I think the answer in many cities has historically been no. And if you look at the surveys of why people don't go, is they don't feel comfortable, and they're not familiar with the repertoire, and they don't see others like them there. And it's, Andrew and I are big fans of Seth Godin, and one of his famous phrases is, people like us do things like this. And so if I don't if I don't see myself as a person who does that, then I'm not of you, so I'm not going to go do this. It doesn't resonate with me culturally. I don't dig the music. I don't see others like me there. Why should I come?
I couldn't agree more. I think that that's something that really is much more important than people think. And I also think going forward, if you look at the demographics of the United States of America, 2011, that was the first year where there was a majority of babies that were born who were non-Caucasian. And if you extrapolate that into the future, sometime in the 2040s, the majority population will be of people of color. And when you believe, when you take that into consideration and you're looking at your future, you have to ask yourself, if you're of that demographic and you go to a concert and all you see are people who basically have no ability, not necessarily ability, but who do not relate to you, at least on a visual level, how that might impact your ability to, have that relevance and fundraising and all that kind of thing to that community. So I do think that it's a timely thing that, this Black Lives Matter thing is, perhaps a springboard for not just this orchestra, but other orchestras around the country to realize that this isn't just going to go away. This is something that people feel very strongly about, and they are not going to relent on it until they see some results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's one thing that I have found, well, I say funny, it's not funny, it's sad, but that a lot of the momentum that and some of the things that have been accomplished over the last few weeks, there have been some people in power who have said, okay, they've literally used the words, okay, you got what you want, like when the officers in Minneapolis were charged. So now, now you need to stop. And again, I say funny, I literally don't mean funny, but yeah, so let me get this straight. So you got momentum, you're making a ruckus, the world is making a ruckus, and it's making progress. So now we need you to be quiet. So, which, that logic doesn't really check out. I have a question for you. I can pinpoint the first time in my life when I was in a room when I was by far in the minority, and it couldn't have been a more supportive environment. I saw James Brown in concert in Chicago my freshman year at Northwestern, and I would guess that the audience was maybe 5% white, and this was at the UIC Pavilion. There was 8,000 people there, and me and my buddy, who was also over 6 feet tall, he had this big red afro. We were dancing so hard that people were laughing, but not at us. It was laughing, it was awesome. But that was literally the first time. What I'm wondering is this: what age were you when it consciously dawned on you that at a classical concert that it was the people on stage didn't look like you? Was that the first time you ever saw one, meaning it's too early for you to remember, or was there a certain age? Because I just took that for granted. My entire upbringing, I took for granted that everybody up there looked like me.
Yeah, I have to say that for me, it was when I was in junior high school. That was actually when I went to my very first orchestra concert in Philadelphia. That's where my hometown is, by the way. And, I was one of those guys that did the student thing where you stand in line and you pay the $3 and you dash up to the amphitheater for all the cheap seats. But, the experience was really very moving for me. And, I formulated this idea that would be a really good thing to do for a living. I was already in the trombone at that time. But I have to admit that there were quite a few obstacles that I had to overcome, both mentally and otherwise, because there was a message in both I guess, explicit and implicit that said that, they don't hire Black people for that. And in fact, that was true. But then something miraculous happened. They hired 2 string players who are African Americans. And Booker Rowe was one, and I can't think of the other guy's name. They're probably both retired by now, but it was one of those moments, right, where you just kind of oh my God, there's a Black person there, and he's playing in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and hey, maybe there's an opportunity, there's a chance.
Wow.
So that to me was one of the most incredible moments that I can remember as a young person growing up, and I still remember the shock, well, maybe not the shock, but that's kind of a good word, of going in there and seeing that occur and saying to myself, yes, that's something that could happen.
Powerful. Why? What a powerful experience. My wife had a similar experience up in she conducts at the University of Maine summer band camp every summer, except for not this summer, of course, because everything is canceled. But I think it was last year when there was some 7th grade young woman who came up to her at the end of the week and said that she had always thought that she might want to be a conductor someday. But she was growing up in a small Maine town, so she'd probably seen one conductor or maybe 2 ever. And so she said that she thought she might want to become a conductor when she was older. But now that she saw my wife, who was the first female she had ever seen conducting, she told her, she used the words, "I now know it is possible for me to do this. And so this is what I want to do." It's what a powerful, and again, that's I never thought for half of a second that I could do, I never questioned, rather, I could do this. It was just I need to work hard and then I will be there. It wasn't wait a minute, if I work hard, this still might not be possible. That's just like my brain still today can't even compute how different my trajectory would have been if that was the context.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the things that, is what they call implicit in terms of how people, view themselves. I mean, if, you're the greatest aspect of any kind of discouragement is to get people to convince themselves that they're not going to be able to do this. Then everything else basically doesn't have to do anything. You don't have to do any actual overt action. The people that you're focusing and targeting on this, decide for themselves. This isn't for me. I'm not going to do it. And believe it or not, I think that's still an issue today.
I can't imagine how it couldn't be.
Well, I know it's true, but I mean, we have this great program, and when you talk about fellowship programs around the country, there's a fair amount of skepticism from the people for whom it would be the most beneficial. And so that to me is one of the things that I find the most challenging is to convince people that, yeah, there is a point in time when you can reach a critical mass. And I think, you can see that historically when you think about women in orchestras. If you look at I remember seeing a video of a concert, I think it was a New York Philharmonic, and this was back in the 60s, and there were not one woman in the orchestra,
Wow.
not one, let alone any person of color, even, I mean, it just didn't exist. And, yes, I'm sure that for the very first women that got into orchestras, it was not easy for them. But over time, once there was a certain level or a certain number of people, and people became much more comfortable with the idea that their whatever world isn't threatened by the fact that a woman is sitting next to them, that has now become a non-issue, especially in specific sections, mostly I guess in the strings, but now it's even becoming more common in single part players as well. So I think that, yes, if we can get more African Americans and Latinx people to basically, take the plunge, as it will, it's a leap of faith, as is everything in life, that, there will be some long-term benefit that will, occur. And I think that they can, punch through that ceiling and get into, these opportunities that are available.
I just had this weird parallel occurred to me, which is we have this pandemic in the country, and, it's, at least based on the research I've seen, it's not going to go away until the percentage of people, if there's a cure, of course, but in order for it to change and to start to not affect our lives so much, we need 60 to 70% of the population to get it. And so we have this literal virus that we are kind of dreading, but knowing that that's the thing that has to happen. And now we have this parallel in our culture where it's like you said, the critical mass thing, where now there's an opportunity for people who are interested in doing so to try and infect as many people as possible with the notion that this can change, and that we can build a herd immunity to this backwards way of thinking, and that we have these two parallel viruses, if you will, one benign and one, in my opinion, virtuous, is just sort of a weird, like that. When you were talking, it just popped into my head, and I just thought, what a strange year this is.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with that, but it's just sort of a funky parallel.
I love it.
Man, that hurt my brain.
We need herd immunity from idiots is what we need.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, really. Like...
And I don't want to be negative, but I don't think that we are close to herd immunity yet. Yeah, I think we might have. I don't think that's going to be accomplished next week. Wouldn't it be awesome if right before John's session, like before the Brass Junkies Academy Summer Workshop, be like, I just saw the Washington Post is reporting we just reached herd immunity from idiots. So like we can all just celebrate, like that'd be amazing. So yeah.
I love it.
I guess I just got to stay positive. So
There you go.
Lance, why don't you talk to the beautiful people about the Papert people?
I would be honored, Andrew. So the Mary Papert School of Music is at Duquesne University in beautiful and sunny Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown. And if you want to find out about all the goings-on that are going on in the School of Music as they relate to the brass area, there's a fantastic lineup of brass faculty there, James Gourlay and Chad Winkler and Mark Houchin and Zach Smith, and the list goes on. And
John
there's
Fletcher,
another guy.
I think, right?
Absolutely. And there is a page that you can link to in the show notes, and you will be able to find out about all the goings on going on at the Mary Papert School. And that was at the instigation of our dear friend Jim, overdub until your eyes bleed, Nova, for making that possible. Actually, speaking of which, have you looked at your phone? I think that project. So I guess Jim is working on a really cool. John, are you part of that thing?
Yeah, I have been part of that. I think they actually finished it.
Yeah, I just got it. He just texted us a link.
Yeah.
Right as we were recording this. So,
oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So, you want to talk about what it was, and then we'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Well, it was basically. I'm trying to think of the name of it, but I think it was like a
lift every voice and sing.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, and basically it included all the African Americans that they could put together to record a part, and then I think Jim was one of the ones that put it together, and of course he did a lot of work on it. I think Wycliffe Gordon made the arrangement of it, and
he's pretty good.
It was, yeah, he's and not just that, but he's a pretty good guy too.
Yeah.
And
let's not overstate things, John.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so it was really an important thing. I think that people really wanted to get out in this particular time, and also I think that there's not a lot of knowledge about the fact that there are quite a few African American low brass players out there, and it's a great opportunity to get that out.
I think so too. I can't wait to see it now that he hit that thing up. Oh,
yeah.
No. Yeah. I thought I froze up on you guys.
Nope. No, we were just ignoring you.
Huh?
So, John, I'm sure you listen to every episode of the Brass Junkies, so I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here. But yeah, every
we don't. Why would he?
Yeah. I bet John has listened to the same number of episodes as my wife has, which is 0. But the every episode when Lance reads that ad for the Papert School, he gives Jim Nova some new nickname. So that's why overdub until your eyes bleed. That was my favorite one, which had no relevance to reality at all, was Jim Bubblebutt Nova. That was
Bubblebutt's definitely the winner.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
He still we'll say he thanks me every time he sees me, and people frequently come up to him and call him Bubblebutt.
I'm sure there's a gesture of gratitude.
There is a gesture. Way. Yeah, it doesn't involve all of his fingers, but it is a gesture.
Lance just gives and he gives and he gives, So yeah. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what it was like to tour Venezuela with the LA Phil. What was that like?
It was very interesting. Of course, people in the orchestra, and myself included, were concerned about safety. So we basically pulled all the stops out in terms of, keeping everybody safe. We constantly had a police escort. And I can honestly say that, when you look at the country itself, we went to Caracas, and that was actually a very beautiful city. It kind of sits in a bowl, and it's very, temperate climate-wise. Has a very nice look to it. it was a little hard to imagine the desperate aspect of in terms of the poverty and how that related to the crime element. So we were, unfortunately restricted to all movements that were only organized. And there were a few times, and of course, we cheated on that and kind of went off on our own. I was amongst those. Um, you know, uh, but it was generally with some escort from some of the really incredibly nice people who were part of the Boulevard Orchestra. It was a little weird. So, for example, you're driving, and most people think, when you get to a stoplight, stop and wait for it to turn green, but there you didn't. You just went through the stoplight. So I was thinking, like, this is a little, insurance rates must be pretty high here. But you know, but it turns out that there's a concern that if you stop, that you
Oh,
might become a crime. So
Oh,
that
wow.
was a little bizarre. But on the positive side, we got a chance to go to the, I guess what they call nucleos there, which are these schools. So, for example, like every single day, a young child, and this basically happens from the time they're just starting elementary school. They go to these schools, and in elementary school, they'll play like claves and little ding dong, xylophone things. Then they progress to the next level and so forth and so on. And it's not just, a bunch of, the sounds of these kids just kind of playing. A lot of these kids are really good, and they basically have this kind of experience each and every day. And of course, the ones that are ready to graduate and more advanced, they teach the younger ones, so they really do have this incredibly accelerated progress that's measurable. I mean, when you see these kids, they are really accomplished, and they're incredibly enthusiastic about what they do. So to me, that was exciting to actually experience, because you actually get a chance to kind of revisit your own, path when you just got into playing music, and you see it in their eyes, uh, basically, in the most pure form. I mean, they're doing it because it's really they love what they do, and they express that love in every single class, every single day.
Hmm.
So that was really great, and of course the audiences were absolutely nuts. That was when we did you know all these Mahler symphonies, which was crazy. I mean, I think there's no way it wasn't crazy. We did like all the Mahler symphonies, alternating orchestras between the Boulevard Orchestra and our orchestra, the LA Philharmonic,
Right.
and then we combined the orchestra for Mahler 8th Symphony of 1,000, which was probably the only time I've ever performed it where there were literally 1,000 people on the stage. It was like a lot of people. Trust me on that one. It was amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I had forgotten that that was the program. That was like, yeah, you've got this big, audacious international tour that's already got lots of challenges, and somebody's like, let's do every Mahler symphony while we're there. It's like, holy
That's
mackerel.
right.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And then, to boot, they had, board members and, celebrities with us. And, you know, it was quite an undertaking. And the fact that we all got through it, and, everybody was safe and sound, is speaks to, not only, the organization part of it, but the people there that valued the fact that, we were there, and that they took care of us. So I thought that was really excellent.
any w- idea on how the LA Phil is going to come out the other side of the coronavirus thing? I mean, have you talked about, changes to repertoire, or, I mean, is there, I'm sure there are meetings and plans going in place, which doesn't mean that news always makes it to the bass trombonist, but do you know kind of what's happening or what's planned?
Well, generally, I think they want us to be in the dark because they know whatever plan that's going to happen, we're going to ruin it.
Well, and I also want to,
But
I do want to correct Lance. He's not just the bass trombone. He's aren't you principal bass trombone? Don't you have that on your in your title?
Well, no,
Oh.
only my wife calls me.
Oh.
That's about it. Yeah, among other things. But
Yeah, right.
yeah, but yeah, you know, that's a good question because you know, of course, one of the first things we were to do in the fall was to go to Carnegie. You probably read that Carnegie is canceling their season,
Mhm.
so that obviously is out. You know, I don't know whether we'll continue, at least in the immediate future, to do the large works that we've kind of become famous for, if you will, where we'll do these, you know, expansive projects that, you know, require a cast of millions and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I think my best guesstimate about where we'll be on the other end of it is that we will have, you know, I guess what I would consider a more traditional approach to concerts where we'll actually, I mean, and this, I know this sounds really weird, but this is true. This is a fact. In this past season, we only did one concert where there was an overture, a concerto, and a symphony.
Wow.
And it stood out like a sore thumb because that's just not what we do. Right? We do like, you know, Alice in Wonderland or, you know, some Andreessen project where, you know, there's all kinds of stuff going on or Seeger Ross or something like that. So basically, I don't know if that's going to be starting up immediately. My guess is that we'll can kind of sort of become more traditional in the sense that we won't do like as many multiple programs in a week. That we'll do more uh, I guess what I would consider to be the standard in the industry. I think you know there'll be a lot of pressure on us to do other things. You know, I think there was this past year is basically the continuation of our 100th, our centennial season, and in that season we did 55 world premieres.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think that that kind of thing is going to happen going into the next season. There'll probably be only, you know, 10 world premieres, but I think, you know, it'll be um, scaled back in that regard and hopefully, you know, give us some time to recuperate, you know, on the other side of this.
I was about to read the Parker mouthpieces. We both just breathed in at the same time. It was like, and then we both stood down. So Lance,
You guys are like mind
it was.
meld. I love it. Yeah. I love that.
Lance, I'm dying to hear what you were about to say.
I was going to talk about Parker mouthpieces.
Yeah.
No, I was going to ask, what are they having you? Are they asking the players to do stuff now? They asking you to record things or do performances from your homes, or how are they asking you to be involved during this?
That's a good question. I know there is a lot of product out there. People and other orchestras are, you know, basically doing some of their own, you know, living room recitals and putting them out on the pages. There's very minimal amount of that going on here, and I believe that the philosophy is that the market is saturated with that kind of thing,
That's
and
for sure.
that people, you know, are not necessarily reaching the numbers that they would really like to have. So what I believe will happen with us is that they'll do some archive performances and broadcast them either in a closed format, like our own Facebook page or whatever social media vehicle, and use that with a kind of I guess there's a better term, but you know, people get to see that content, you know, and if they agree to see it for free, they'll be contacted either email or there'll be a donate button or some such like that. So the purpose of it is to have a larger footprint so that we can reach as many people as possible, as opposed to just, well, you know, I have this project and I'm playing a concert here for, you know, just these very few people. I also think we'll be working quite um, I don't know, I guess regularly with YOLO, teaching opportunities, coaching opportunities. You know, life goes on even in a pandemic, and
Mhm.
people who are trying to learn, you know, this is a critical point in their lives, and we certainly don't want to, you know, miss out on that opportunity for those kids to say, okay, you know, now you have to give up your, clarinet lessons for the next, 8 months. I think the Philharmonic wants to have a part in that, and also, so musicians will be doing that kind of.
See, I mean, you just completely hit the nail on the head in terms of the market is completely glutted with people just playing whatever. And I think they're doing it. Some are doing it just sort of out of panic. Like, we don't know what else to do, so we have to do this. Instead of, let's take a hot minute and think about, well, what's our mission? What's important to us? And what's a cool, creative, interesting idea that could capitalize on this situation or be the silver lining in this thing, instead of just like fire hosing content and hoping that something in there sticks. And so then it's, no sooner did you talk about the fact that they're not asking you to do that, but that there is an emphasis in the YOLO thing, because that comes out of your mission. And then now all of a sudden it makes perfect sense why you would do it and what you would do, rather than we have to do something. Well, you don't. You actually could just take a minute and reevaluate, is this the time for us to act or reinvent or refocus? And I think that's really wise. So good job, John.
Well, again, I'm sure that my role in it will be very limited, but I do understand how important that is. So I see the reason. I mean, you don't want to be off the radar forever.
I do. Yeah, I get that.
To see, that this is something that's going on, but I also think, it's better to have it organized in a way that you can maximize what you do, as opposed to flood the market with things.
Right. What's the point of it? If there's a point to it, then let's make a point to it. What was our season going to be, and how can we have those same themes come out, but in a different form, instead of just, all right, everybody pick your favorite tune and record it and put it on the internet and hope for the best.
Exactly.
On my other podcast, The Entrepreneurial Musician, I spend half of the time just talking about being remarkable. If everybody was just remarkable, I could just stop talking into a mic. But yeah, meaning like worth remarking about. And you're right that the first couple of a cappella videos I saw way back in like March was like really cool. It's like, oh, wow, people are able to still make music, even though it's not quite, but now it's like you can't even, it's hard to get 50 people to click and actually watch the thing, because it's just been. And what was it a Danish orchestra, the very first orchestra that put together like one of those, orchestra wide videos? It might have been Beethoven 9 or whatever, and I remember I saw that, and it was like really a moment. It was really powerful. And now those things are, I mean, there's literally 800 of those videos from professional orchestras. Just they're not remarkable anymore. Yeah. So
that's right.
Speaking of remarkable, I'd like to thank Parker Mouthpieces for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. Parker Mouthpieces offers remarkably fine customizable component mouthpieces for horn, trombone, euphonium, and tuba, including the Andrew Hitz Artist Model Tuba mouthpiece and the Lance LaDuke Model Euphonium mouthpiece, which is just as remarkable as Lance's. You can find out more at parkermouthpieces.com or follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Could everyone please do me a favor? Could everyone please go to parkermouthpieces.com? And if you could email our dear friend Michael Parker, and if you could tell him, we haven't done this in a while, have we, Lance?
No, it's true.
If you could email Michael Parker and tell him why. This has to be something with dealing with remarkable. Tell him the most remarkable mouthpiece story you can think of, and if you can make it as technical and as boring as possible, then that would be very appreciated. I don't want him to appreciate this. I definitely don't want you to email him and tell him that your mouthpieces have helped you sound like you more. This isn't supposed to be heartfelt. I'm just trying to annoy my friend. So email Michael through parkermouthpieces.com and tell him just put words down. Pretend you're trying to fill in a 5-page paper with the last 3 pages when you got nothing to say, and then hit send. So thank you, Michael, for providing the hosting for the Brass Junkies. So, John, you live in LA, and so you know our dear friend Jens Lindemann.
Absolutely.
And I'm sorry about that, but we, as you know, Jens has been going through some chop problems for a very, very, very long time. And you are a very thoughtful person. You're a very thoughtful, like, musician, teacher, just human. No pressure here, but we're thinking that maybe you could be the breakthrough that Jens needs in this time of need. So what advice would you give to Jens to help him get on the other side of this thing?
Well, as you know, Jens is the poster child as a victim of the treble clef, and he's been challenged with that since a very early age. And one of the things that we presume might be able to help him would be a healthy dose of Ritalin, but to that effect, even that hasn't really helped him with his chop problems. I think the best thing for him to do would be to get a job as a as a band director, and basically be only able to play euphonium in a marching band for a while, and that will basically help him to not only get in better physical condition, but it will help him to straighten out and loosen up.
Get a
It'll
job
definitely help with his humility.
Get a job as a band director so you can play euphonium in a marching band. I don't think John knows any actual band directors, because that's not what they do. That's really funny. I like it.
Well, but I think he could be a breakthrough artist.
He could be a remarkable band director. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I mean that's he always wants to lead the band, so that's kind of sort of the place to do it, from the euphonium section.
It's true. And most of his clothing looks like it could be or was once part of a marching band uniform.
That is. I don't think you meant that as a compliment to either Jens or marching band. Yeah, if you were upset about that marching band slate, please email Michael Parker at parkermouthpieces.com. And he can process your request. John, you could have stopped, by the way, when you said, Jens could get a job. You could have just stopped right there. Just get a job. Yeah. Just get in.
Well, there is that too.
Yeah. Oh boy. So we are really looking forward to having you teach for us at the Brass Junkies Academy Summer Workshop, which we are recording this the weekend before it happens. When this airs, we're actually going to be in the middle of the week. And if you're listening to this on Tuesday when it's released, John is actually on Thursday. Lance, what are the topics that he's going to be talking about?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have those right here in front of me, and I don't need any time to pull them up because they're right before me. John Lofton, Thursday, will be talking about ear training, warm-ups, and networking.
There you go. Yeah, we're looking forward to having you and 14 other guests. And even if you're not hearing this till Tuesday and you want to hear more from Maestro Lofton here, the whole week is available to stream online through September 1st. So you can watch the entire thing live and later, the whole thing later, whatever. It's going to all be available. But thank you for loaning us your expertise for that. For that thing. That's going to be awesome. We're really looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Thank you.
Good. Yeah. Well, and Lance, is there anything else? We're going to do the bonus episode here.
No, there's nothing else.
Well, that got weird, which is, this was a relatively tame one. So, which I'm glad that, I love how when people tune into this thing, they have no idea what to expect. Like, John, do you know Jeff Nelson, horn player in Canadian brass?
Yes.
Yeah. So Jeff is a good friend of ours, and we interviewed him right at the beginning of this quarantine thing. Like wasn't the exact beginning, like everybody, we'd been inside for like 3 weeks or so, and the three of us were all super punchy. And that, like, I don't know. I don't know what percentage of sentences that I started that I was allowed to finish, but it was like less than 30%. Lance, same. Our guest, the same. We would ask him questions because we're dear friends with him, and then we would just interrupt him. It was super punchy. So people hear that. We like to keep people guessing. So, but John, you were awesome. Thank you for talking about the very serious stuff at the beginning, which I'm trying to do a lot of listening. I got a lot of learning to do. So I always appreciate it when people like you lend your expertise and your wisdom and your experiences, with people like me who are, I got some work to do. So thank you for helping me to do that work. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed every minute of it.
Awesome. Well, there's still time. We're about to do the bonus episode, so maybe we can get John to not enjoy that. So we're going to see. And then we've also got the workshop. There's no way he's going to be happy about the whole thing for all three of these. But anyway, our Patreon patrons, we're about to, as you know, a week after every episode, there's a bonus episode, which we're going to record with John right now. And you can hear that in a week. And I think that's going to do it for another episode of the Brass Junkies. You've been listening to the Brass Junkies on the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network. If you would like to hear the bonus episode featuring today's guest, please visit patreon.com/thebrassjunkies to learn how you can support the show and instantly access all bonus materials, as well as gain access to a special patron-only Facebook group. The Brass Junkies is produced by the amazing, wonderful, and truly inspirational Will Houchin. The theme music was composed by Fernando Dados and performed by Andrew Hitz and Lance LaDuke. We are at Pray for Jens on Twitter and Instagram and have a Facebook page at facebook.com/prayforjens. You can find out more about the Brass Junkies and all the other Pedal Note Media podcasts at pedalnotemedia.com. This has been a presentation of the Pedal Note Media Podcast Network.